the wave came over me of awareness and rage and sadness and like everything that can happen in a postpartum body when you realize that you don't have enough time to spend with your child when they leave the hospital. And so I decided to write an email to leadership at the organization. And thankfully, that email went up the chain. I didn't hear anything for about a couple weeks. And so it was like, "Ugh." But then I finally heard back on an all staff call that they had decided to expand their paid parental leave policy and include between 4 to 6 weeks of NICU specific leave paid on top of their regular paid parental leave policy
Because of an email.
because of my email. Yeah.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Well, hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. You know, the first couple of episodes, we really focused on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. What are they? How does it feel? How can you navigate through all of that? And then the rest of this season, we're starting to move into even more ways that you can advocate for yourself, take care of yourself and your baby. Today, we are going to focus on paid parental leave. Some of y'all have that, and I am thrilled for y'all. That is an awesome thing. Some of y'all have just the bare minimum, and some of y'all are like, you know what? I'm having basically to work while my baby is in the NICU, and then I'm going to have to try and figure out what we're going to do upon discharge. No one wants to think about worst case scenario. Certainly when you're pregnant, you're like, I don't need to think about that because this is going to be the perfect pregnancy. And then now you're finding yourself in the NICU, and there's a lot of unknowns. Today's episode is really going to focus on a couple things. One, we're really going to focus on advocacy. How can you be an advocate for you and your baby? Okay. And then the second part is how can you take your life experience and how can you make a change to other people's lives and to your own because you have learned to be an advocate because of that life experience. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm really excited about my guest today. Her name is Sherenne Simon. She is a public health strategist and a business advisor with 20 years of expertise in maternal and child health, health system change, and organizational development. As the principal of Global Simon Group, her firm has worked with companies like the Gates Foundation, USAID, and the Tufts Black Maternal Health Center to advance social impact. Sherenne is the former head of health equity at March of Dimes and a workplace pioneer and advocate for NICU-specific paid parental leave. Sherenne is a mom to a son who was born premature, spent 100 days in the NICU, and is now joyful and thriving, which is always great to hear. She is also the author of an upcoming book, and we are excited to chat. So with that, let's visit. Well, I am so grateful to have an expert here. Sherenne Simon, you are a gift, especially for parents who are looking to have a better experience when it comes to paid parental leave, which we're going to talk about. But thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
You should be. You're an expert, and I think you have a lot to share. So, how of all the things to be an advocate for, how did you become an advocate for health disparities, equity, both in maternal and in infant health? I know that's not necessarily something that everyone is an expert in, but you are, and so I'm curious how you got there.
Yeah. Thank you. So my journey started when I was young. So my parents immigrated here from the Caribbean and really made sure that we were connected with all parts of different communities. So we served in soup kitchens my whole life growing up, worked with folks that are currently experiencing homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, the idea that people grow up and have different social economic situations was always ingrained in my household, in my life growing up. It expanded when I went to college and found out about public health, learned about different communities and different disparities and differences in outcomes, and then it really did start to hit home when my aunt got diagnosed with breast cancer after so she had a late diagnosis and then had a very early death. And for me, that was, it's a statistic that happens to Black women with breast cancer. And I realized that my personal and professional worlds were coming together and that I really needed to double down on becoming more familiar with equity and disparities and really reaching out to different communities. I was able to expand that interest globally. So I went to Rwanda at some point in my career and worked to develop a maternity transportation and communication system for women in rural Rwanda so that they could actually have someone walk with them or transport them from their village to the hospital so they wouldn't have to give birth on the side of the road. And so, my interest in this and my expertise is personal and professional. And it's something that really, hits home for me.
It sounds really personal. I am always struck by people that allow themselves to be put into situations that allows them room to grow, but also not just that, but then to turn around and to be an advocate and to be a real, person for change. I think that's a really beautiful thing. So I know it's personal too, because I mentioned in your bio that you're a NICU mom. So tell us a little bit about your NICU stay with your child.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, many women were getting pregnant, and I did as well. And so, I got pregnant, and slowly after, realized that there were some complications with the pregnancy. Ended up getting admitted to the hospital and having an emergency C-section, and he was born very early. And that was my, start as a NICU parent. I had professional experiences before working at organizations like the March of Dimes and others where I was really aware of, the maternal and child health outcomes and some of the experiences of, NICU families from a professional perspective. But personally, it hit home when my son was born early. And then all of a sudden, I have to navigate, having a newborn in the NICU, just giving birth and, this new life that is evolving in front of me.
Yeah, and we said that he was in the NICU for 100 days. That's not nothing.
It's not nothing. It's like 3 really long months. Oh, yeah, I don't wish that on anybody, honestly. It's what something that, tests your spirit, it tests your faith, it tests
Mm.
your intellectual knowledge about for me, about medicine and healthcare. But thankfully, honestly, he was in a really great NICU, and I had a really, for lack of a better word, a good experience with the providers there. They also knew that I was a professional in maternal health, so, that level of privilege I was able to bring to the situation, and that allowed me to advocate for myself and for my child in ways that maybe others may not have thought to originally, but it was, holistically a transformative experience that, um, I'm really grateful that it's over.
Aren't we all? Every
Right.
NICU mom is like, "Praise God, that's over with."
Yeah.
So you mentioned March of Dimes. So you used to be the head of health equity at March of Dimes. So tell me about the advocacy portion that you encountered there, but also as you started dealing with moms and babies, and then how that was changed, I guess, whenever you had your own NICU baby.
Yeah. So, you know, advocacy is something that can happen at a national level, at a regional level. It can happen in an institution or an organization. Advocacy can happen in all different facets of life and society. And, with my work professionally, I was able to work with different teams to ensure that, advocacy priorities incorporated different aspects of health equity and health disparities, ensuring that, different communities were being addressed. And so, right now in the United States, Black women, along with Native families, have really abysmal outcomes for maternal and
Yes.
child health, right? And so ensuring that there was integration and that, we were advocating in a direction that was to improve the best health outcomes for moms and babies. And so there's a systemic level and there's a regional level, like locally. And so there are different programs locally. I worked at March of Dimes twice. And so the first time I worked there, I worked at the state level and was able to really dive into some of the state politics and the state issues that were happening in New Jersey. And so that was really informative because it allowed me to, realize how certain bills are made and how, you can incorporate different things into different pieces of legislature that are important. I was in charge of policy actually in New Jersey at that time. And so, now being a parent and being an
Yeah.
individual that's experiencing this, I have been able to experience and to, deploy my advocacy skills in a personal level. And that's been really helpful because, advocating from things as simple as when you're going through an experience, I want to make sure that my child gets these three things, or that I get, this medicine, or that we get these services, or with social workers, trying to figure out the massive NICU bill that some families are straddled with after after their child comes home. So it allowed me to be able to kind of put all the pieces together.
I'm glad that you mentioned bills. That's coming up later in the season. So we have definitely some people who are going to be talking about that. In fact, I think it's next time. You were a NICU mom after you worked at March of Dimes. Is that right?
While I was there.
While you were there. Okay. So what changed or what shifted when you're working there and you're seeing these disparities and opportunities for us to be better, and then bam, you're in the NICU? What shifted for you?
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I was experiencing my professional life and my personal life at the same time, right? And so, for
Yeah.
example, I explain it to somebody in I'm writing a book, and in the book I write that it's akin to having cancer, going through chemo, and working at a cancer institute all at the same time. And that resonates for people because they are like, whoa, that sounds crazy, right?
Yes.
And so it was intense, to say the least. It was, a very intense experience. What did shift for me, though, was that, I thought that there is a bit of privilege that I have with regards to my knowledge and my expertise in this space. And I
Right.
can utilize that to help myself and hopefully help others moving forward, whether it's advocating for a specific shift within the NICU, um, or doing something in the professional space as well, and in the personal space, making sure that I'm chatting with all my friends, those that are pregnant, just letting them know that, sometimes things go a different way than you expected, and and there's a way to like work through that, and there is support out there as well.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. A lot of things shift after you have a NICU baby. Relationships, your body, relationships with your family and with your spouse. I mean, all those things shift. What when you start thinking about changes that you wanted to make, let's start talking a little bit about paid parental leave, because I know that some people in workspaces have really generous paid parental leave policies.
Mhm.
Some have just what the government requires, and then depending upon the size of the business, they're not even required to offer that. So, what should a parent do, I guess, when you're thinking about paid parental leave? How did that shift for you whenever you were a NICU mom? And then if you are wondering like, man, there's got to be a better way to have better leave at my office or my place of employment, what should you do?
Yeah. So I think whenever a person is pregnant or a birthing person gets pregnant, it's important to look at your policies in your job if they have them, and figure out there's two lanes, right? So there's the lane of if everything goes really well, what
Right.
happens, right? And that is, does my insurance cover all of the well visits, et cetera? Um, and then the other side of that is if something happens that may not be aligned with my desire or my wish, or there's a complication, Do I have benefits? Yes or no? Do those benefits cover additional services? Do you have to see a maternal fetal medicine specialist? Is your child, after they're out of the NICU, are there early intervention services that are covered by your state or by your region? If not, how do you get into those things? So there's the other path, and nobody wants to err on the negative, right? But
Right.
it is important to look at your policies, to look at what's offered, and to see, okay, well, if something shifts, um, what are my options there? And then when you're working in this environment, I mean, paid parental leave is something that I hear about all the time. And now that the reproductive landscape in the country is changing, or has changed drastically, it's really important for women and birthing people to really understand what they're allowed, how much, for how long, and then what's the financial burden going to be to your household, but then also to your own personal and mental health.
Right.
Because that's the other piece that, folks, when you think about it, and you're going through your pregnancy, you're like, okay, check, 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 got this going on, third trimester, second trimester, da 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 da. But the safety net that you might need if there's a complication or something happens, um, that's obviously not thought about. I actually
Well, because nobody wants to think about that, right? Like we all want to have the
Nobody.
textbook pregnancy and nobody wants to build in the contingency that, oh, if it goes wrong or if it goes different, this is what I should be preparing for. Because you can't put that on Instagram. That's the hard stuff of life,
And you don't
right?
wanna scare people, right?
Right.
And so I found a really nuanced way for some of my friends that were pregnant during the time I was, or, experienced what walked with me during my experience and then got pregnant. I said, "Listen, just pack your bag at, like, 23 weeks, 20 weeks, just pack your bag. That's all you gotta do, right? Just make sure that if something happens, and, we're praying that it doesn't, if something happens, at least you have your comfort items with you. And so when you get to go wherever you are, then you'll feel that much more comfortable in and amongst all of the chaos that happens when a complication does occur."
No, that's good advice. I like that. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. All right, so you play kind of a big role in getting paid parental leave. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I worked at this organization, and they already had paid parental leave on their policy, and it was something that was the average amount of time I think that most mid-sized organizations offer. While I was actually in the labor and delivery room, I met a doctor who was about 25, 20 years older than me, and it was like 3 in the morning. I'm hooked up to all these machines, and she comes in. We start chatting away, and she tells me about how her child was delivered early, and now they're going to college. And so she gave me a little bit of hope. At the same time, she mentioned that she had to go to work 2 weeks after delivering her daughter. And I flipped my head. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is insane. And in my head, I'm thinking things are so backwards back then, right?
Right.
I can't believe she had to do this 20, 30 years ago, et cetera. Now, fast forward to, I'm in the same position, and I'm looking at my paid parental leave policy, and I'm realizing that what they offered was not going to cover me after my son came home from the NICU. And so, if your baby's in the NICU for 100 days, 3 months, um, and you only have about, a couple months leave, then when your child comes home from the
You're
NICU,
not there.
you have no leave left. And, the in I'm writing a book about, professional situations and influencing others. And in this book, I write about how, the wave came over me of awareness and rage and sadness and like everything that can happen in a postpartum body when you realize that you don't have enough time to spend with your child when they leave the hospital. And so I decided to write an email to leadership at the organization. And it included a couple of things. Here's what's going on with me professionally. I am choosing to save my leave and return to work early so that I can use some of my leave when my baby comes home. And here's how, examples of some structures that other companies do to support their employees that have children in the NICU, or even other countries like Germany and others, right? And thankfully, that email went up the chain. I didn't hear anything for about a couple weeks, and so it was like, "Ugh." But then I finally heard back on an all staff call that they had decided to expand their paid parental leave policy and include between 4 to 6 weeks of NICU specific leave paid on top of their regular paid parental leave policy
Because of an email.
because of my email. Yeah.
Because you must have been looking back thinking of all those life experiences that you had that like led you to that moment, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's what I wrote the book about because as I am writing my resume and retouching things, I'm like, I did this amazing thing. I changed this paid parental leave policy in this organization. I advocated for it and they said yes. And then they implemented it instantly. And how do you write that in a bullet point? You can't. And
Right.
so I had to reflect back on all of the professional experiences that I've had, all the different spaces where I worked, where I didn't say something, or I tried to say something and it didn't work, or, or what I utilized this time that, or the strategies that I used this time to actually make it stick, right? And so
Yeah.
in that moment when I found out that this policy was approved, I was ecstatic and elated and hit with this wall of holy cow, I can't believe they did this. And I get to go back to the NICU and work on
Oh,
like breastfeeding and all these awesome things with my baby, right?
yeah.
It was amazing. And then once my son came home, I was able to step back for a bit and realize that, navigating professional spaces as a person who is underrepresented or a woman in the workplace, it's really tough. And when you do that and you have a child in the NICU, all of these different things come up and you have to reprioritize and shift and everything. And thankfully I was able to lean on. I had a couple of good friends that are amazing business communicators that helped me craft the email. I reflected on the fact that in the past I had not said something, right? If I knew
Right.
that things could be different or that there could be a transformational aspect in the organization. And then I also reflected on what worked in the past at this institution to help ignite change and what hasn't worked in the past. And so some strategies work for some people and others work for others. And so I really did this like holistic view in that really short term period.
I was getting ready to say, I'm impressed that in a time that carries a lot of stress and a lot of overwhelm, you took all that into account and then you said, okay, so I'm going to put this together and send this and see what happens. I mean, I guess I would call that love, that you loved your baby and that you said, there has to be a better way.
And I couldn't be the only person dealing with this, right?
Right.
Like
I'm
I
thinking of people that are in the NICU, that many of them, I think we probably all have stories like this where their babies are in for months and they have to go to work because they're trying to say, like you said, so their only option they feel is to say, well, the hospital's taking care of my baby. We'll go, during visitation hours, or if we have other kids, we'll balance that too, do the job, which I'm sure they're not fully engaged in because it's so difficult to be
yeah,
focused on that. And then when the baby comes home, that's assuming that everything's great and you don't have to go to other specialists or you don't have follow up or surgeries. Like,
right.
That's a lot. So I'm impressed that you did that, but also maybe it's some hope and some encouragement to people that if they look around and say, this is not okay, how can we do it better? That instead of just doing the workaround, that they say, what can I do? I mean, I'm hoping that your book will at least walk them through what they can do. But um, what are like two things, Sherenne, that you look back on and say, those two things made a massive difference and those are applicable to people in any season of life?
Yeah. I think the one thing is at that time when I was, home from delivering, my baby was in the NICU, I was working, I was taking calls in the lounge at the NICU,
My gosh.
in between pumping and doing all of the things that NICU moms do.
Hmm.
Um, I knew from maybe just previous life and work that I've done and personal work that I've done that three buckets were important: the health and well being of my child, the health and well being of myself, and then the health and well being of my partner and my family and any support that I had. And so I made sure to, I knew that I could advocate for care for my child. There was there was only so much I could do really because I'm not a
Right.
medical professional. For myself, my birthday landed right in the middle of my NICU stay, and my girlfriend picked me up from the hospital and brought me to a spa, and it was so selfish, but so needed for mental
Yeah.
health, right? Because we were in that he was in the NICU for 100 days. We were there 99 days, and we did skin to skin for 99 days.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is happening. We're going to do this. And then lastly, in addition to personal health, is health of my family and my partner and my support system, which included like my mom and others. Uh, and that was important. So making sure that you're able to like just if you need a framework to look at, what you're taking care of in those three buckets. And then the last thing is to just be aware that this is a season. The NICU stay is a season that
Yeah.
comes to an end when it comes to an end, and it's not forevermore. And
Yeah.
I think because I um, have worked in this space professionally, I was aware of that it was a season, and I didn't know how long because you never know how long, right? Your child
Right.
is going to stay in the NICU. Sometimes, depending on how premature they are, they can vaguely estimate. But for someone who's had a child who's full term and has a child in the NICU for 2 days, or who's premature and has a child in the NICU for 3 months, it's really hard to gauge. But I
Right.
just knew that I needed to take it one day at a time and that this was a season. And that if I can get through this season, then I will be okay to transition to the next season, which is bringing home a NICU baby, right?
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother podcast
I was
about
getting ready to say that's another episode. Yeah.
exactly. So it's a season. It's a
Right.
season that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's something that, I do not wish on any person, individual, parent, or child. But when
Sure.
you do have to go through it, the support that you can get, whether it's personally, professionally, is really important. And I got all the support. I tapped into every single thing. I got some free lasagnas. I got literally, I was like, okay, please help me because I need help. Even though I'm a professional, I'm a human, right?
Of course you are. I mean, and I love that you're giving some people some hope, Shereen. I mean, I think that we all desire to be as present as possible to our kids, especially on their hardest days. But also, you're right. You have to take care of the person that's caring for the people. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, advocating for the things that you need, um, it all kind of falls apart. So, I'm going to ask you to dream a little bit. So, if you could maybe describe the ideal way to deal with this, I would love to hear your thoughts. So, what's your dream for narrowing the gap between health disparities and health equity for women, infants, and children's? Like, if you could dream and say, "Man, if we could just do it this way, it would be
Mm,
better."
yeah. I mean, there's a couple things. So really would love to see the United States take on integrating midwifery care into the care model. I was grateful enough to have an OB that operated like a midwife. And so she took a lot of time with me and she was invested in me. And that was a really special connection and
Okay.
approach, like in a holistic way. I believe that, birthing centers are a critical piece to having more equitable births. This is like from a systemic perspective.
Sure.
But my dream from a personal, perspective is that one day the word equality or equity doesn't exist and that, everyone that gives birth has the best possible outcome and they don't have to fight for it. They don't have to advocate for it. It just is the baseline of care, regardless of your race, your gender, your religion, your ethnicity. Uh, the standard of care for women and birthing people in this country are so great that across the line, there is equity.
I share that dream with you. It's a good one, and I think it's possible. I think that we all have to speak up. I mean, I think it's an opportunity if you see something that feels wrong, then you should speak up and say, "How can I be an advocate for this?" I mean, I think we have these opportunities in life. We give these experiences. I know you were talking about your time in Rwanda and other places, also in the workplace, that they all led to that moment. So I think it's an opportunity for us to look back and say, like, what moments happened in our NICU stay and how can we be an advocate? And it feels small, but I know that it doesn't always turn out that way. I mean, sometimes all those little things can add up and we can see real systemic change, which is a real beautiful thing to see. I love asking for people's wisdom because I think it's a great way to end the podcast. So, if there is a mom or a dad that's listening to this and they really desire to have better leave, paid parental leave for their own experience and their own family, what would your encouragement be to them?
My encouragement to them is that it's what I say all the time. You don't have to do everything, but you can do something. And whether that is doing something for yourself, for your baby, for your company, for your partner, for the folks that are caring for you, you don't have to do everything. It's a complicated system. There's work dynamics that are indescribable, but you can do something. And that little something, you know, could really shift your health and well-being and the health and well-being of your child and your family.
I am grateful for your wisdom. I'm looking forward to hearing about your book. We'll definitely post links to the show notes, but Sherenne, thank you for all your good wisdom today. Y'all, I love talking to a mom who inspires me, and that is exactly what Sherenne did today. I hope that y'all enjoyed that interview. Okay, in today's 2-minute take, this was my big takeaway. If you find yourself in a situation where the paid parental leave is non-existent, abysmal, could be better. I think that's all of us. I think the question of asking yourself, could it be better? And then the second question is, how can I make it better? I loved that Sherenne looked around and said, okay, this could be better. I'm going to send an email, but before I send that email, I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to employ some of my friends. So I'm going to enlist some help and have some people look over what I'm about to write. I'm going to take into account my life experience. I'm going to look at the company and see what they have done before and what they haven't done before and where the wins have been and where the losses have been. And how can I use all of that information to advocate on behalf of my baby, which ultimately means that I can be a better employee because I'm able to care for the people in my life that I love and therefore come back and be a better employee. I really, really loved that 3-prong approach. So ask the question, then enlist the support, and then send the email, whether it's an email, whether it's a letter, whether it's a phone call, whatever, send the message and say, we can do this better. I got fired up. I'm sorry, that sounded like a TED Talk. Anyway, I felt like that was a really good sort of thing that she laid out for y'all. And I felt like it needed to be reiterated. And then also, and she and I talked about this, the NICU it's a season, y'all. You are not always going to be this overwhelmed. You are going to get to a place where you are going to find your feet again. You're going to find your voice again. And it doesn't mean that things are necessarily going to be easier with the kid in the sense that maybe they will always have this lifelong disability, this lifelong illness, this lifelong challenge, but you will find joy in that, and you will also find your advocacy in that. And so this episode was all about tapping into that inner advocate that is being crafted and created while you were in the NICU, and it will never leave you. I can tell you that our time in the NICU 14 years ago, y'all, is still encouraging me to be an advocate today. And I believe that it will always be with me. So if there's anything that you took from Sherenne's episode today, it's be an advocate for you and your baby, because you are worth it. Whew, we had a lot to talk about today. Okay, so don't go anywhere, because next time we're talking about this.
If you do not get a resolution or an answer in this interaction, whether it's this meeting with the specialist or conversation with a nurse or phone call with the insurance company, what are my next steps if this does not get resolved? Do not end an interaction without either a resolution or next steps.